Hey everybody, thank you for waiting. Sometimes I'm a little bit delayed in starting, but I love all of you and I appreciate all of you. And we're going to have yet another great late night chat. Thank you for your patience. And I'm going to bring up the opening music here, and we will jump right into it. We will jump into tonight's conversation. Here we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're having yet another one of our great late night conversations. So thanks for being here. We're just going to get into whatever it is to talk about. I'll be following the usual format. First, I give my opening remarks. Then from there, we do the roll call. And then from there, I will answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our program, the best way to do it is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. There's the link, and send your question. Ian has already done it, and I will address Ian, and I will address his question. Questions are always appreciated. You can also super chat. Super chats are also appreciated. You can also do Rumble rants. Rumble rants are appreciated. Whatever you feel like doing, send a question. Questions make the second half of the show fun. As far as announcements, the Center for Political Innovation is in motion. My keynote address from the convention just went up on the YouTube channel today. Lots more video from the convention coming out. Great talks by various people, a long Q&A session. A lot more material is coming out. I'm editing lots of video, so keep an eye out for that. Go and watch my keynote speech if you haven't had a chance. We are the Center for Political Innovation, and we are doing amazing things. CPI is America's anti-imperialist movement, and we're getting it done. Yes, we are the Center for Political Innovation. We are building an anti-war, anti-imperialist movement, and it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And so I hope that you will consider becoming a member. Take a look at the recent videos. A lot is happening. And, a lot is happening. So, I am looking forward to engaging with all of you. I'm getting reports of different things happening around the country. A lot of great things are happening. So tonight's stream, we're going to get into a couple different things. This is going to be one of those chill streams, I guess, but I do have a few things to talk about. Then we'll get into questions. So if you got something for the second half of the show, buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin is the best way to send it. We do super chats, etc. But anyway, so tomorrow will be 6 months since the war against the Islamic Republic of Iran was launched. The USA attacked Iran with no provocation, with no justification whatsoever. The USA basically just unloaded on the Islamic Republic, murdered the supreme leader, blew up a girls' elementary school, killed all kinds of innocent people, and just attacked Iran. And now it's 6 months later. And in that 6 months, what we have seen is the United States, which is supposed to be the ultimate military power, the country that is supposed to be able to just overpower the entire world, be defeated. And that's what has happened. It appears at this point that all the U.S. embassy staff that were evacuated from the Middle East, they're all returning. And Donald Trump has, at this point, backed away from his threats to bomb Iran, and he's saying, oh, we're going to impose sanctions on them. We're going to impose sanctions. Oh, they're going to economically suffer. Iran is rolling its eyes because it's been subjected to horrendous economic warfare and sanctions from the United States for decades. Meanwhile, Qatar and Turkey and a number of countries throughout the region are coming to Iran's defense, trying to facilitate negotiations. It's over. The United States lost. The United States thought that they could overpower Iran, and that didn't work. Then they thought they could threaten Iran, right? They would threaten to blow up all their power plants and all of this. And Iran called their bluff, and Iran retaliated very, very effectively against U.S. military bases throughout the region. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, which is still not open. Iran caused huge economic problems in the United States. Iran activated Ansar Allah and the Houthis to continue their activities in the Red Sea and elsewhere. And at this point, the United States has basically accepted defeat. And Donald Trump, according to the reports we're getting, the White House is very desperate to get Iran out of the headlines heading into the midterms, because this war is wildly, wildly unpopular. Iran has said they can withstand any economic D-Day that Trump imposes. And basically what we learned from this war is that the United States can sucker punch. That they're very good at sucker punching. It's sneaking up and murdering high-ranking government officials. They're very, very good at that. They can sucker punch. But when it comes to having an actual fight with Iran, the United States is not capable of actually defeating Iran. And the USA has had loads and loads of its military infrastructure, all our tax dollars as Americans, billions and billions of dollars go into all these military bases throughout the Middle East, and they were all destroyed. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And the USA has the latest report. So I don't know how this is possible. We spend billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars on our military. USA is running out of missiles, according to some reports. I mean, it just reveals that all the military power that you and I are in debt up to our necks to cover. I mean, the U.S. national debt is trillions and trillions of dollars. All of that spending doesn't even buy a military that is capable of defeating Iran. Now, I mean, I don't want the United States to defeat Iran. I think Iran is right to support the Palestinians. I think Iran is right to develop peaceful nuclear energy. It has the right to do it, and I don't think there was any justification for this U.S. attack on Iran. But that doesn't stop me from emphasizing that the United States failed. Other than cowardly assassinations, cowardly attacks on girls' elementary schools, cowardly murders of people like Ali Larijani and Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei, other than cowardly assassinations, the USA was unable to accomplish anything. And Donald Trump's credibility as a president is completely shot. He came in saying that Biden was no good because he was spreading war around the world with Russia. Well, now Donald Trump can't say that, can he? And Trump came into office saying Biden was no good because look at all this inflation. Well, he can't say that, can he? Donald Trump's presidency has been completely shot. It's completely tainted. And the midterms are going to be an epic failure for the Republican Party, which means that the House of Representatives is going to be retaken by the Democrats, most likely. The Democrats will then use it to carry out impeachment proceedings. And it looks like Donald Trump's presidency is over before the halfway mark. And he'll be out, and they're going to try to give us President J.D. Vance. This is the epic failure, the absolute epic failure of the Trump administration. It looks like there may even, in the 2028 election, be a third-party campaign from Thomas Massey, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Somebody like that may launch an effective third-party campaign to effectively split the Republican vote, since most Republicans are anti-war. And because of that, the Democrats may take the presidency again, which is not necessarily a good thing. But, if Donald Trump had not done this war on Iran, you could say he might have a political future. The Republican Party might have a political future. And the Republican Party still may have a political future. But Donald Trump's name is forever tainted by this. And, this is really the ultimate embarrassment. And it's getting crazy. So I love this, right? So, obviously, after Trump killed the supreme leader of Iran, a lot of people in Iran were saying that the USA should retaliate against President Trump, or we were saying that Iran would retaliate against President Trump. And, obviously, that is something that the U.S. Secret Service and security services should be concerned about. But the response of the Iranian people and the rallies on the streets of Iran calling for vengeance against President Trump didn't upset the American people. The American people, it's not that they wish harm on their president. They don't. But at the same time, the American people, they understand, well, we did kill Iran's leader, so it kind of makes sense that they would be on the streets of their country screaming to kill our leader. And even though the streets of Iran were filled with people calling for vengeance against President Trump, the American people weren't concerned. So they've now made up that. I think they've made it up. I find it very hard to believe that, the American people aren't concerned about Iran threatening President Trump because he's so unpopular. And because it kind of, in terms of international tit for tat, the USA did murder Khamenei. So in a lot of people's minds, even though they don't wish any harm on President Trump, it makes sense that people in Iran would feel that way. They understand, the logic of it, even though they don't agree, perhaps. So now they're telling us that, okay, well, Iran is threatening Barron Trump, which I don't think is really happening. But it's like they're trying to get the American people more upset with Iran. And you would think, as unpopular as Barack Obama was, if there was a country where people were out on the streets screaming, for vengeance against Obama, you think Americans might be upset about it. But Trump is so unpopular that, they're having big, huge rallies in Iran screaming, for vengeance against him. And Americans are like, okay. They don't agree. Americans don't agree, but they're not upset by it. So they're now trying to say, well, Iran is threatening Trump's son, because that's supposed to pluck our heartstrings. That's how desperate they're getting. This is really, really something. President Nixon went to Venezuela. Was it Venezuela or Argentina? He went to Chile. He went to somewhere in South America, and people threw eggs at his motorcade. This was in the 1950s. And Americans were just so upset. How dare they throw eggs at our vice president's car? That was when Nixon was the vice president. And it made Nixon wildly popular. And now we've got people all over the streets of Iran screaming for acts of vengeance against President Trump. And Americans are like, well, they obviously don't agree, but they're not concerned, really. They're not moved. They're not, this is where we're at. These are very, very, very strange times. Iran has defeated the United States. Yes, they experienced a lot of casualties. There's no question about that. But the government is still very, very well intact. You'll remember, and this is why I urge people not to believe what they're said. 6 months ago when this war began, people were saying, "Oh my God, the mullahs have fled the country. They've fled the country. They moved to Russia. It's over. The Islamic Republic's going to be. It's over. It's already over." And that was just a lie. That just wasn't the truth. But when we were protesting out in the streets of New York, there were wise guys who said, "Oh, no, I saw on the internet. No, it's true. The Ayatollahs have already fled the country. The government of Iran is over. It's done." And the Shah Reza Pahlavi declared himself the interim king or the interim leader or whatever, and it was all a hoax. And the reality of the situation on the ground in Iran is that for 6 months straight, in all of Iran's major cities, people have been out in the streets chanting against imperialism and chanting against the wealthy people that are viewed as sympathetic and collaborators with imperialism. The Revolutionary Guards of Iran have been mobilizing these huge nightly demonstrations. 6 months straight, people in Iran have been going out into the streets to wave their country's flag, to unfurl images of the martyred Supreme Leader Khamenei. They've been going out into the streets and having anti-imperialist rallies, and not only rallying against the United States and against Israel, but rallying against the wealthy people in their own country that they view as not fully committed to anti-imperialism. There is an upsurge happening in Iran, an upsurge of anti-imperialism. The public in Iran is more aligned with the Islamic Republic and its anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist goals than ever before. The Revolutionary Guards are recruiting in big numbers. The people of Iran are proud of their revolution and its legacy. They're cheering for Ansarullah. They're cheering for Hezbollah. It's wild. For a long time, there was a layer of wealthy Persians in Iran that are racist against Arabs, right? And ethnic rivalries and bigotry go on in every corner of the world. But, there's a layer of anti-Islamic Republic Iranians that their grievance against the Islamic Republic is they say, "Oh, we spend all our money helping Arabs, helping the Yemenis, helping the Lebanese," right? And that's been a grievance of the reformists and the less revolutionary, less anti-imperialist wing of the Iranian public, right? The Persians, a lot of them, are very, very, there's a layer of wealthy Persians. I shouldn't say the Persians in general, but like wealthier Persians who maintain kind of the attitude, we are not, we are superior to Arabs. They view Arabs as inferior. They view themselves as superior. And I saw this when I walked through northern Tehran. There were Iranians who said to me, "Oh, I'm a white person like you. We Persians are white people. We're not Arabs. You think we're Arabs. We're actually white people." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure my racist grandparents would have thought that you were white people, but if you want to think you're a white person, by all means, think you're a white person." That existed, right? And that part of the reason it was the Islamic Revolution of Iran was that racism was outlawed by the Islamic Constitution. And in the Islamic government of Iran, you have Arabs, you have Turkmen, you have Kurds, right? Different ethnic groups are represented, right? And that the Shah's regime that the United States backed was very much a Persian supremacist regime that was for one ethnic group. But that is not the case anymore. And the Islamic Republic has a lot of support among national minorities in Iran. And a lot of the wealthier Persians, one of their grievances against the Islamic Republic is that it gives a lot of its funds and money to backing anti-imperialist movements among the Arab people. But now that's wildly, wildly popular on the streets of Iran. Iranians are very proud that their country is supporting Hezbollah. They're very proud that their country is supporting Ansarullah, the Houthis. My book on the Houthis, right? Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? Is now available in Persian, Farsi. It's apparently on its third printing. I'm kind of blown away that my book, I figured Iranians would know way more about the Houthis than I did, but I guess the fact that some American guy wrote a book that's less than 100 pages long, honoring and talking about who Ansar Allah is, this book has made a splash. And people are reading it in Iran. And David Rovix is glowing with pride because he's featured in the book, right? David Rovix, who's faced a huge cancel culture campaign and all that. The great David Rovix, he's featured in here for his song that he wrote about the Houthis. And he's been promoting this. Oh my gosh, they're reading a book that features David Rovix in Iran. That's great. I mean, the Islamic Republic is very, very well intact. There is an upsurge of anti-imperialism all throughout the Islamic Republic. Turkey, Qatar are basically saying the United States doesn't have the right to wage even economic warfare against Iran. Another weird thing happened, and this is interesting, right? So the CIA director of the United States went to Russia today, and the New York Times ran a story about it that is hilarious. It's hilarious to anyone who knows anything about the conflict. The New York Times is claiming that Ratcliffe went to Russia to tell Russia that they are losing the war in Ukraine. And people believe this. I mean, this is hilarious. But they're saying, oh, yes, according to an unnamed source, the CIA director, Ratcliffe went to Russia to inform Russia that they're losing the war in Ukraine. Russia's not losing the war in Ukraine. And everybody knows that. You look at the situation on the ground. Russia is not losing in Ukraine one bit. But the New York Times ran that. Oh, the reason that the CIA director went to Russia is to tell them they're losing in Ukraine. Well, that didn't fly. And so then now the other story they're going with is, well, the CIA director went to Russia to tell them not to attack a NATO country. Why would Russia attack a NATO country? You attack a NATO country, then you automatically go to war with all the other NATO countries, right? And yeah, right. Russia was about to attack a NATO country, but then the CIA director got on a plane and said, "Don't you do that!" And give me a break. No, the CIA director went to Russia, and I believe most likely, we have no idea, right? According to the Kremlin, it was kind of a routine visit. There wasn't anything particularly notable about it. I believe that this is part of the peace process, and I believe it's related to the peace bridge. I believe it's related to negotiating an end to the conflict, and I believe it's related to Ukraine and their rapidly growing corruption scandal, and the fact that so many Ukrainian officials are caught up in corruptions. The fact that Ukraine is running out of military personnel. I mean, there's no young men left in Iran to draft. They're dragging people off the street, and it's getting to the point that there's nobody left. I think the United States is going to be in a situation where they have to sign a deal, and that the Zelensky government is going to fall. And they're negotiating an end to this conflict. And I think it's related to the fact that the USA lost the war in Iran. If the USA had been able to overthrow the Islamic Republic, that would have been a huge game changer. But that's not the case. The Islamic Republic is very, very well intact. The new supreme leader is leading Iran and giving messages and being very well protected. They are very much hiding his location. The United States has been epically defeated by Iran. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has all the cards. And the White House is desperately trying to change the conversation to have a fight with Canada. Right? That was the big news today. I don't know if you saw. Donald Trump changed Lake Ontario to Lake America. This is stupid. It's stupid is what it is. It's just stupid. It's just stupid and idiotic. Okay? But I did a video. I've explained that Trump and certain sections of the American deep state want Canada for specific reasons. And I think it's related to that. But at the same time, it's kind of like changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. It's stupid. They want to talk about anything but Iran. And I believe that. That is coming out. The White House is desperate to talk about anything but Iran because they have epically failed so badly. They lost a big chunk of the MAGA base. Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massey, I mean, they lost their base. And at this point, I think Trump's presidency is tanking. They're trying to get sympathy. Oh my God, Iran is threatening Bahrain. I don't think Iran's threatening Bahrain. I mean, the whole thing is just completely crazy. And now the CIA director pays a surprise visit to Moscow. I don't think it was a surprise to the Russians, but it's a surprise to the world media. We're finding out about it. I think we're heading towards an end to the conflict in Ukraine. And I think the war with Iran is pretty much over. If the USA is sending its embassy staff back to the various Middle Eastern countries they were evacuated from. And I think Iran has been victorious. And the Iranian public is more anti-imperialist and revolutionary than ever before. And here we are. And I think, unfortunately, the Strait of Hormuz is probably going to stay closed until the midterm elections, which is economically a disaster. But I think that's the way it's going to be. I think Trump is begging them to open it up. He's offering them the stars and the moon. And basically Donald Trump wrecked his political career as a favor to the Israelis. And, that's that. And I think we should all be thinking about post-Trump American politics. What is politics in America going to be like after Donald Trump? What from the Trump era will stick and what won't, right? The left is not as crazy as they used to be, right? The left is starting to allow anti-war people to be part of it again. The left is also realizing, there's this whole thing with AOC and Mamdani and others are saying, well, woke one was crazy and we need to not do woke one. We need to focus on economics a little bit. So the left is kind of getting their shit together a little bit. They still have problems, but, and then there are people on the right that are sticking to their anti-war principles. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think we're headed towards post-Trump politics. Trump is, at this point, saying he's not going to run again. And his popularity is so low, and the midterms are coming up, and he's going to lose them. And that means the next 2 years, he's not going to be able to govern. He's going to be fighting impeachment the whole time. And I think that we're headed towards a situation where the world is going to have to accept that, the new republics in the Donbass are part of Russia. They're part of Russia, and they're staying part of Russia. It didn't have to be this way. Ukraine could have honored the Minsk Agreement and the Minsk Accords. It could have respected the right of the people in those regions to speak their own language and, not have their World War II memorials torn down. That's not how it is. And, the Donbass region is part of Russia. It's part of Russia to stay. And that's how it's going to be. Donetsk, Lugansk, Odessa, it's all part of Russia. That's just how it's going to be. And Donald Trump is going to govern as an embarrassed, defeated man for the next couple years. And they're going to be trying to figure out who the next one to replace him will be. J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio. I don't think it'll be Marco Rubio. There's a repeated pattern of politicians that no one likes who just keep getting boosted, and they keep trying to get us to like them because they are owned by the neocons. Nikki Haley. Nobody likes Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley, when she was the United Nations ambassador for Donald Trump, she read her statements to the Security Council like she was a hostage. She sat there like a hostage reading a statement into a videotape. I am representing the United States. Israel has the right to exist. She was the worst. But she ran for president, and they rolled her out there because the neocons own her. And Kamala Harris. Nobody liked Kamala Harris. I wrote a whole book about how basically she was unpopular with the voters. She got, Tulsi Gabbard, who was completely marginalized by the media, she got more votes in the primary than Kamala Harris did, but she ended up getting the vice presidency and then becoming the nominee after they forced Biden to finally drop out in the 2024 elections. And nobody likes her, but she's owned by the neocons. Nobody likes Marco Rubio. but he's owned by the neocons. And so they're going to pretend, they're going to push him on us really, really, really hard. But we're in an era where the ruling class are fighting among themselves. There are divisions among the ruling class. And because of that, they have to activate the people to fight each other. So they can't just make us like people in the same way they used to. Donald Trump, the reason that there was such an extreme response to Donald Trump was he did some good old-fashioned demagogy. He tried to sound a little bit like a Bonapartist. He tried to kind of build kind of a mass movement to support him. We're going to see more of that. This is Bonapartism. This is what I've written about, right, in my books. What is Bonapartism? What is a counter gang? We're going to have a third party. I think it's already been announced. There's going to be an America First candidate, most likely in 2028, right? I mean, we have lots of third parties already. The Green Party, the Socialist Party, the Libertarian Party. But I think in this upcoming election, there's going to be a much more serious third party candidate who will take people that hold on to some of the anti-imperialist, non-intervention, I shouldn't say anti-imperialist, but non-interventionist aspects of MAGA. I think there will be a candidate who panders to that and takes votes away from the Republicans. I mean, we're headed for interesting times, but who knows? We're also in times where things change very rapidly. And that's one thing I have noticed is things change very, very rapidly. I've got a couple other things I want to comment on tonight before I start just answering people's questions. If you do have a question for me to answer in the second half of the show, the best way to send your question is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. You can also do a super chat. Super chats are appreciated, just like, as always, we take super chats on this YouTube channel. You can also do a super chat. buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. I will say, well, anyway, I'll talk about that later. But yeah, send questions for the second half of the show. We got a question from Ian, which I'll try to answer tonight. I may give a more complete answer later, but if you got any questions, send it. Another thing, so Dolly Parton died, country star, a figure who was, I would say the peak of her career was before I was an adult, especially, but even when I was I was a young child. She's before my time, so to speak. Even when I was a kid, Dolly Parton was still widely loved. There was like an amusement park somewhere, Dollywood, right? I think it's in Tennessee, something like that. I never went to it. And I saw the movie she made, 9 to 5. It's kind of a 1970s kind of feminist movie that she made. I watched the VHS tape of that. And she was a country musician, and she was very proud to be from the South and from poverty. And she was a cultural icon. I appreciated some of her music. I did. There were a number of tracks that she did over the years that were enjoyable, had kind of a folksy, small-town appeal. I've learned to like country music more and more as I've gotten older. I don't like modern country music for some reason. I like older country music. I liked folk music when I was a kid. I've learned to love folk music. I still love folk music. My parents loved folk music. And when I was a kid, country music I didn't like. A lot of the people in the area I grew up in really liked country music, and I just thought it was very stupid, country music. But as I've gotten older, I've come to really appreciate some of the country music, but not modern country music, right? There's a song called "The Gambler." It's pretty good, right? Know when to fold 'em, know when to hold 'em. Right? There's another song called "Try a Little Kindness," which I like. And I guess what I like about a lot of country music is that a lot of country music is just, my wife cheated on me and I feel like shit and I'm gonna go get drunk. But there's some of it. There's at least some of the 1970s country music does have like an optimistic vibe to it. And that every country star has a gospel album. I like hymns just because they have strong melodies. I just really like that. So, I appreciate some of her work. I guess she was a Zionist, right? And I guess right after she died, somebody defaced her Wikipedia page and called her out for being a Zionist. I mean, I don't know. When I think of Dolly Parton, I don't think Zionist. Okay, I just don't. She probably was, because if you're not a Zionist, they destroy your career. And now, because so many people are speaking out, one can be critical of Israel, but look what happened to Mel Gibson. Look what happened to, if you're in Hollywood and you're solidly anti-Israel, until very recently, you don't have a chance. Well, she was in Hollywood. She was a big country star. She starred in various movies, and, so the fact that she was a Zionist, it doesn't surprise me. I just don't think of Zionist. I don't have an image in my head of her making political statements about Zionism. And actually, from what I understand, she was a bit of a liberal, right? She was notably pro-LGBT, which with her demographic, people from Tennessee, people from evangelical Christian backgrounds and stuff, that's not necessarily a popular thing. It certainly wasn't popular in the 1990s, but she was notably pro-LGBT. I haven't come across her doing things that one could call, that I disagree with. Sure, right? I found a recording of her singing the Green Berets song, which I kind of enjoy the Green Berets song. It's a right-wing militarist song from the 1960s. It was a hit song by Barry Sadler, and I found a recording of her singing it, but she dedicated it to the CIA, and she dedicated it to the Delta Force and like snipers and stuff. That was pretty bad, but and she was, so I don't know. I don't really want to judge her politically necessarily, but I enjoyed some of her work. She was a cultural icon. The movie 9 to 5 that came out in the 70s was a kind of a feminist, it was a feminist movie, but it was also about the workplace, right? It was about workplace discrimination and sexism. And it's a decent film. It's one of those 1970s films where the plot is a little bit too complicated, right? You watch, it's around the same time as like Saturday Night Fever and Pretty in Pink and some of those 70s movies where the plot is a little too complicated. It's still a decent film. I don't know. Generally you think about Dolly Parton, right? I don't know. I have good feelings about her. So I'll say that. Another figure who died that's a little closer to the kind of thing we generally talk about on here is Ward Churchill. And I want to talk about Ward Churchill a little bit because I have at times been very harshly critical of Ward Churchill. And at other times in my life, I've been a huge Ward Churchill fan. And in the past couple of years, I was actually in his presence quite a bit in the last 2 years because of the Uhuru case. And, I honestly, I can say I respect the man. And I respect the man. And while I don't agree with many things he's done over the years, I do strongly agree with many things he's done over the years. And he was somebody that I was really studying as I was getting political as a teenager. So I'll just say I respect Ward Churchill, and I mourn his passing, and I take my hat off to all the good things he did, all the great stances, like the Uhuru case. Ward Churchill, I first heard about Ward Churchill because I was a high school student, and Fox News canceled him. Cancel culture started before Facebook, before Twitter, and it started on Fox News. He was a professor. He was the head of the Native American Studies Department of the University of Colorado. And Fox News, Bill O'Reilly's show, did 100 episodes about him in a row, right? For 100 days straight, they talked about him. And it was because he had written an essay after 9/11 called "Some People Push Back," arguing that basically pointing out that the USA had killed a lot of innocent people, about 500,000 innocent people, with sanctions on Iraq. And that, it was genocidal what the USA had done, and that it would make sense for the Iraqis to retaliate against the United States with something like 9/11, right? If they were facing that kind of terror, they would respond that way. And so Fox News covered this endlessly. Oh my God, this Native American professor who, said the 9/11 attacks were justified. How dare he? He called the people in the Twin Towers little Eichmanns. Oh my God, they went after him. I hated Bush, and I hated the war in Iraq, and I was interested in anybody who was a socialist or a communist or a far left critic of the Bush administration. So I immediately became a Ward Churchill fan. When I was 16, 17 years old, I got on the internet. I downloaded every Ward Churchill speech I could get my hands on. I went to Borders, which was a chain. You know, it used to be there was Barnes & Noble and Borders. Borders closed down. Now there's just Barnes & Noble. There used to be Borders. I went to Borders and I bought A Little Matter of Genocide, and I bought On the Justice of Roosting Chickens, and I was a huge Ward Churchill fan, and I thought kind of like a third worldist, right? And Ward Churchill's politics were very, quote-unquote, third worldist, right? He basically believed that white Americans were settlers. They were bought off. They had no revolutionary potential. And at the time, I was very, very interested in the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP. And I noticed that almost every book that Ward Churchill wrote had a couple paragraphs lashing out at the Revolutionary Communist Party, which was interesting. Ward Churchill was a prominent Native American scholar who, is part of the left, the far left of the 1990s, I guess, right? He wasn't as well known, I should say, as Howard Zinn, as Noam Chomsky, but he was a prominent academic as the head of the Native American Studies Department, as a prominent Native American scholar. And he was anti-war, and he had written the COINTELPRO Papers, which is a great book on the history of FBI repression. And he was just a kind of far-left professor who was at far-left events. He went to the Anarchist Book Fair every year and gave a talk in San Francisco, and he was just a far-left guy. Fox News discovered him and went after him. And that's how I heard about him, and I loved his stuff. And I first met Ward Churchill at the U.S. Social Forum in 2007, and I remember I was late. I was speaking on a panel about Che Guevara with my friend Mike Martinez, who is now a CPI member, and I was late, and so I was running to get to the forum. I wanted to get there on time, and I ran around the corner, and there was Ward Churchill. And not surprisingly, he's a very tall man, and he was very tall, and he was shouting at an RCP woman, a woman holding an RCP newspaper who was very short. And he was yelling at her, and I just thought, that's Ward Churchill. That's so cool. That's famous Ward Churchill. So then the next time I met Ward Churchill was at Mumia Abu-Jamal's court date. I think it was 2009, 2010. Mumia Abu-Jamal had a court date in Philadelphia. I drove to it with comrades from Cleveland, and there was Ward Churchill. I introduced myself. I said, I first heard about you on Fox News. Bill O'Reilly went after you, and I learned all about you. And he said, yeah, Bill's good for that. Shook my hand. Okay, now, I learned later about his position on Nicaragua and how he had been very, very, very much opposed to the Sandinistas of Nicaragua and had basically worked with the CIA against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And so I became very, very harshly critical of that. And in some of the early writings of CPI, we're talking decades later now, I actually spoke quite harshly of him because I kind of equated his position of, saying that white workers in America are the enemy, with the position that he took regarding the Sandinistas. Basically, in the 1980s, he, as a Native American, as an indigenous activist, he took the position that the Sandinistas were white Marxists and that the Sandinistas were violating the rights of the indigenous people in Nicaragua and that it was okay to work with the CIA against the Sandinista government of Nicaragua. And he openly took that position. And Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, who is another scholar of indigenous heritage, has written about, she says he bullied her and that he, like her first day on the job at one of her academic jobs, he showed up and started screaming that she was in the Weather Underground and trying to get her fired. And she's written some pretty harsh things about him, which, could be true. I don't know. But he was the speechwriter for Russell Means. And Russell Means, the Native American activist, he became a CIA asset. Especially in the 1990s, Russell Means, was a member of AIM. And as AIM, the American Indian Movement, was being broken apart by the FBI, Russell Means, who was their leader, he deteriorated politically. And they made Russell Means a a household name. He played a Native American in like every Hollywood movie, and he testified, before Congress about how Indian reservations were an example of failed socialism. And and Russell Means, was used, went to Nicaragua and made a propaganda film against the Sandinistas. And Russell Means kind of took the Native American movement in a negative direction. Ward Churchill was his speechwriter at the time. So, but then, his book on the COINTELPRO papers is very good. His book about, exposing the FBI's dirty tricks against activists, and, Jim Vander Wall and Ward Churchill wrote a very good book about it. And so in the last couple years, as I've been supporting the Uhuru movement against the FBI, Ward Churchill was there, and he would be at the same events. I would be there with him. I mean, we didn't have coffee or anything like that. We're not on speaking terms. But I do remember when I gave a speech at the Uhuru House right before their trial began. I spoke about the Islamic Akek ring and the smashing of idols and all of that. And I could see in the audience Ward Churchill grinning. He appreciated that. And I think he appreciated that as an indigenous activist. When I was talking about, do we really think primitive man was stupid, that he could carve a piece of wood in his backyard and that was God, right? And he grinned when I said that. He appreciated that, because I think that is a slur on Native people that has been used, that they're stupid. They think that those totem poles they make are gods. Well, no, and I was explaining, it was in my speech I gave at the Uhuru House. I talked about how the idols that people erect stood for principles, right? That they weren't literally worshiping the idols. And he appreciated that point, and he's a Native American scholar, right? He's studied indigenous people and their religious beliefs, so he probably knows what I was saying 1,000 times more than I know it. And so Ward Churchill passed. He died of natural causes. He was a guy from Illinois, grew up in rural Illinois, Peoria, Illinois. He had indigenous heritage, and he fought in Vietnam. After he got back from Vietnam, he was very alienated from U.S. society, got involved in the anti-war movement, and began exploring his indigenous heritage, and got involved in the American Indian movement, was involved in some armed activities with them, where they carried guns and did some pretty militant stuff. And then he went into academia, and he became a prominent scholar of the indigenous studies in the United States. And, I guess where we would disagree is that I generally am sympathetic to countries like the Soviet Union, China, Nicaragua, Iran, Venezuela. I tend to be sympathetic to those kind of governments. He was not. He took more of an indigenous perspective, that they're all just, this is European Marxism. And he, a lot of that kind of indigenous anarchism stuff is very degrowth oriented. And the CIA does fund those kind of people. And I think, unfortunately, he had no problem. He openly wrote about he had no problem getting CIA backing. It's interesting. Harsh critic of the FBI. A very, very harsh critic, and did great work exposing the FBI. Was a huge supporter of Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist who was, framed by the FBI and locked up. But he seemed to very much believe that it was okay for indigenous activists to work with the CIA if it was to their benefit, and if the target was Marxists, because he believed that Marxism was white and European. So that's Ward Churchill, a mixed figure, but you know what? I was at the Uhuru House supporting Chairman O'Malley. He was at the Uhuru House supporting Chairman O'Malley against the FBI. There were some other people there supporting Chairman O'Malley, and there were a lot of other people whose views may be on paper closer to mine. They weren't there, right? The FBI raided the home of a group of black revolutionary activists, tried to send them to prison for 15 years. And, the Workers' World Party wasn't there, right? And I found out they weren't there because I was there. Who am I, right? I'm a guy on the internet. I'm the leader of the Center for Political Innovation. I'm an RT reporter, and they apparently told the Uhuru movement that if Caleb is speaking at your events, we're not going. Well, Ward Churchill, I don't know if he knows the things I've said over the years that are harshly critical of him. He might. I don't know if he knew. I spoke rather negatively of him at various points. He may have known about it, but he said he may have known about it, but he didn't say, oh, I'm not going to support them because Caleb's there. No, he knew it was the right thing. He said the FBI comes after a group of black revolutionaries. I'm going to support them. Well, that shows that he's a little bit more principled, right? The Workers' World Party might agree with me on a lot of international issues, but they are mad at me on a personal level, and there's bad blood between us personally, so they couldn't go and stand with a group of black revolutionaries against the FBI. Whereas, Ward Churchill and I vehemently disagree about Nicaragua, about China, about a lot of things, but when the FBI came for a group of black revolutionaries, he stood with them, even though I was there. Maybe he didn't know who I was, and that's fine. But he didn't seem to have an issue, and I don't know. It's all very interesting to me. So I try to sometimes on these streams I will get very fired up about people that I disagree with. I will get very fired up, and I'm trying not to do that as much, right? Because it just, whatever. And like Ward Churchill is somebody that I have vehemently disagreed with a lot of things he said in his life. But in the final years of his life, on the issue that he and I were the most active around, we agreed. And very few others did. So good for him. We both stood up to the FBI. We were both against what the FBI was doing to Chairman O'Malley. And we both saw how darn important it was to oppose it. So good for him. And many other people didn't. So, that makes me think that Ward Churchill, whatever disagreements we might have and whatever criticisms I might have of his work, I mourn his passing. And I say that he took heroic stances on many issues. There are other issues where I don't necessarily agree with the stances he took, but he stood with the Uhuru movement. He stood with the he stood against the FBI. He wrote the COINTELPRO papers, which is a great book. He has called out, his book on the justice of roosting chickens. It has kind of an extended version of the essay that got him canceled. Some people push back, but then it just has timelines of all the crimes of U.S. imperialism, starting from the 1700s all the way up to today. And it's a really good rebuttal to these people that want to give you a body count. Well, communism killed 100 gajillion million people. Well, his book, he's got the lists of all the crimes of American imperialism, all the people killed in U.S.-backed coups, So, I don't know. He's an interesting figure, right? He's an interesting figure. And, the fact that he stood with Uhuru makes me respect him. So there we go. That's Ward Churchill. So we talked about Dolly Parton. We talked about Ward Churchill. And I also, I guess I did want to, so I put up today the video of my remarks about the my keynote speech from the CPI convention. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. I'm going to show you a clip from that speech. This is when I talked about the great Roger Waters. This is a section from that speech. This was where I honored Roger Waters, and I showed some of my conversation with Roger Waters. This was the section of my keynote speech about Roger Waters.
Talk about someone that I really, really admire. I had the honor of meeting him. I've met him a couple times, but once I got to interview him, and that's the great Roger Waters. What a hero Roger Waters is. What a hero.
Have you faced retaliation for the stances you've taken?
Huge amounts of retaliation for the last 20 years, solidly from the Israeli lobby. Yeah, they've tried to destroy my career over and over and over and over again, and they're still doing it constantly, all day, every day, and all night too. And we will turn this up again, because what they're doing is insane, criminally insane. Genocide is just ultimately the worst crime that any of us have ever dreamt of, and they're doing it in front of our eyes. And it's not just the Israelis, it's Keir Starmer, it's the UK government, the Americans, the French, the Germans. The Germans Americans have recently banned my movie in Germany. Can't be shown.
Our entire life.
Roger Waters made that movie. It's a great movie, by the way. I would recommend anybody to go and see it. It's called This Is Not a Drill, which is interesting that that's a proper title for a rock and roll show. I don't mean to shout over this lady.
No, and what would you like to say to the younger people getting involved in Palestine activism?
Get involved and keep getting involved. Do what I do. When you wake up in the morning, think to yourself, what can I do today? And then do it. Doesn't matter what it is. The main thing is that your heart has been stirred, that you've recognized the love and truth in what we're all saying here today. And that we have to put a stop to the occupation of Palestine. Yeah, the genocide, that's the first thing. We have to get rid of the occupying army. They have to relent. We must free Palestine, the country, from the river to the sea.
The Wall is about psychosis. That's what the film is about. It's about a guy who's had a lot of trauma and pain in his life and a lot of hardship, and he goes into a hotel room and he becomes psychotic. He isolates himself from the world. You know, that song, Comfortably Numb, that's really what that's about. You're withdrawing. It talks about hearing the voices and you can't hear what the people are saying because you're just so in your own world. And how does The Wall end? The Wall ends with the wall tearing down. The way to cure himself is to connect with other people. That's how it ends, right? The triumph is that he connects with his peers. The Wall is the isolation of psychosis, and it's connecting with other people that enables him to get beyond it. It's actually a very, very beautiful piece, The Wall, the concept album and then the movie that Roger Waters created. And it was very brave of him to do. He's revealing a lot about his own life and his father who died and the hardships he had. It's a really powerful, powerful piece that he made. There's some crass cartoons in there and genitals marching around and stuff like that I'm not too fond of. Some other things in the movie that maybe aren't my best thing, but The Wall is really a powerful piece. It's just really emotionally potent. It's very, very loaded. But I want to talk about another piece by Roger Waters that I really like, because he did Shine On You Crazy Diamonds. Do you know Shine On You Crazy Diamonds? That's a beautiful song, and if you listen to it, that's what CPI is about. He wrote it for Syd Barrett, one of the founders of Pink Floyd, his best friend who blew his mind with drugs. And as Pink Floyd was becoming more popular and famous, he couldn't be there. And so the album was Wish You Were Here, wishing that his friend could be there. But then the song Shine On You Crazy Diamonds is he's like shaking his friend. Can you just show the world your brilliance? I know you have something beautiful to offer the world, but you're not able to do it. Saying wake up and show the world your brilliance. That's what CPI is all about. We're saying shine on you crazy diamonds. Wake up, show the brilliance, learn to think. We're trying to awaken people. That's what we're doing. It's really beautiful. Roger Waters, got to give a tribute to him.
Say something about the Yemenis and how the Yemeni people have stood with Palestine.
The Yemenis are, the Houthis. Their response to this has been quite remarkable. And when the USA pulls the full power of its army at them, they go, we're doing the right thing, and they are. Standing with the people of Palestine is the right thing to do today. So we stand with the Houthis and with the people of Yemen, and we have done all the way through. So, thank you. All right. You're very welcome.
Yep. So if you want to watch my full speech, it's up now. That's just the part about Roger Waters in the speech. It's 2 hours and 7 minutes. That's a long presentation I gave, my kind of annual report on CPI, went over everything we've been doing, talked about a lot of different topics. Check it out. Talked about a lot of things like Roger Waters and Maoism and Anti-Monopoly Coalition and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, there's that. I guess now we'll do the roll call. I see now there's 2 Buy Me a Coffee questions that have come in. But if anyone has any more questions for the second half of the show, buymeacoffee.com is the best way to send them. You can also do super chats. Super chats are also appreciated. So yeah, here's the link to send questions for the second half of the show. So let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Portland, Oregon, Jake Howitt. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Alex in Brazil, Ryan in Kansas City, Carter in Minnesota, the South, Huey Long, Maria in Wyoming, Joe in Gutierrez in California, Southern California, Chad in Spokane, Washington. Good to see you. Chad. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Patch in Arizona. Jacob in Wisconsin. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? Names and locations. Finn in Duluth. All right. Very good. I think Caleb in New York City. Well, of course I'm here, unless this is all an illusion. But there you go. Brooklyn in the house. Phil is here. Very, very good. Very, very good. Phil was at the workshop and at the convention, and he had a great time, as did everyone else who was involved. Yeah. Stuart in England. Very good to see you, Mr. Stewart. Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? All right. So the first question that I got via Buy Me a Coffee, Ian, I owe you a real answer to this. You didn't just buy one coffee; you bought a lot of coffees. Okay, and the question was, it was about something I don't know about. And I owe you a real answer to this question. So I need to do my homework. Basically, Ian wrote, after buying 10 coffees, I kind of don't even want to mention this movie by name, but Hollywood made the so-called satire movie that treated the Vietnam War and the atrocities committed as a theme park adventure ride where celebrities pretended to make fun of themselves. In addition to using borderline racist tropes against the Vietnamese, it also made fun of disabled people, caused a lot of controversy with disability rights groups and their families. It's an important detail when we consider how Agent Orange causes a lot of birth defects and disabilities in Vietnam today. Do you know the movie I'm talking about? I don't. Do you see it as an example of Hollywood pretending to make fun of themselves? They're actually laughing at anyone with empathy for the Vietnamese people. Do you think this might be a movie worth protesting against or explaining to people why it's wrong when people say it's funny, or I'm getting worked up about it? I don't know what movie he's talking about here. I don't, actually. I just don't. But it sounds like something that Hollywood would do. And that, there's a lot of Hollywood laughing at themselves and at the same time being completely racist, completely insensitive, and spreading propaganda. A great movie example of that, not a great movie, but a great example of that, is Team America. The movie is supposed to be making fun of American military might and interventionism. They have a song that's like very sarcastic, America, F yeah, fuck yeah, or whatever. But at the end of the movie, first of all, it's really racist against Kim Jong-un. Over the top. Just beyond anything. It is beyond. It's offensive to all Asians. It's just the anti-Kim Jong-un stuff is really, really over the top. Then on top of that, that actually, even though it, it technically, if you want to get to it, is kind of making fun of American interventionism. The movie ends by saying basically that U.S. regime change wars and humanitarian intervention is justified. So, and it's like you could look at that like, oh, okay, they're laughing at themselves, whatever. But you actually get into it, it's like, ugh, right? I talked in my speech, which you should all go watch, right? My presentation. I talked about Sacha Baron Cohen and Borat, right? Borat seems like it's funny, but it's actually Zionist propaganda, and it's actually preaching hatred not just for peoples of the former Soviet Union, not just for Muslims, but for Americans. It's really vile, anti-populist, anti-working class Zionist propaganda, and the target is the American people. And he finds some rather hateable American people, to target. But the message of the film, if you really get at what the movie Borat is saying, it's really awful. And that, that's kind of the worst. The movie The Dictator that Sacha Baron Cohen made, which was a horrendous film kind of celebrating the murder of Gaddafi. There are some, that's how they do it, right? Is that they hedge the pro-imperialist messaging with some edgy critiques of U.S. society, right? In The Dictator, it's basically mocking a Gaddafi-like character. It's pushing the idea that Iran is secretly building a nuclear weapon, which they're not doing. But there's a, when the dictator character is like on trial, he gives a speech about how instead of having a dictatorship, we should just have a wealthy 1% that has all the money. And it's like, and it's like, okay, you said that, but you still made a whole film, basically saying that when Iran says they only have peaceful nuclear energy, they're lying, that Gaddafi was a big buffoon and a murderous dictator, so it was okay for the USA to destroy the most prosperous country in Africa. But you slip in some like Occupy Wall Street stuff about the 1%, the wealthy 1% secretly controlling things in America. And that's how they do things. One thing that I thought was interesting is they made a movie a few years ago for Netflix about the Chicago 7 trial. I was actually interested because Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General, who I worked for, was portrayed in the film. He was a character because he was a witness at the Chicago 7 trial. But the other thing that was amusing is Sacha Baron Cohen played Abby Hoffman. Well, Abby Hoffman was anti-Israel. He was. I mean, Abby Hoffman was not a Zionist. He was not pro-Israel. And if you read both Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, they were kind of 1960s New Left icons, and they did in their later years. Jerry Rubin in particular took some very bad stances in his later years. But I read actually Jerry Rubin's autobiography, Growing Up at 35. And in that biography, he talks about going to Israel and how much he hated it and how it was clearly a settler country. It was an imperialist. He was very open as a Jewish person. He said, I went to Israel. I tried to live on a kibbutz and I was disgusted by it. And, and that's one thing, so Sacha Baron Cohen is this ultra Zionist. But they had him play Abby Hoffman, who was an anti-Zionist Jew. So very interesting, very, very, very interesting. So I don't know, Sacha Baron Cohen, and he, a lot of his stuff where it seems like he's being edgy or being funny, and that there are some like anti-establishment things thrown into it, but the overall message is a really disgusting pro-imperialist one. So people are telling me the name of the movie in the chat, and I think that movie came out a few years back. I didn't see it. I saw it advertised. I didn't realize it had all of those things in it. So there you go. I will have to investigate, Ian, and give you a full answer. You sent quite a buy me a coffee there, and you deserve a full answer to your question. I didn't realize that film, I mean, I never saw it, but if it's the film that people are talking about, I never saw it, but I do remember it being advertised. So I'm going to do a thorough investigation, Ian, and give you a more proper answer to your question. Someone else bought a coffee, and I wonder if these are all coming from the same person, and I want to treat everybody with, and give everyone, they call it like the charity of assuming you have good intentions. But someone who calls themselves someone, I mean, it's anonymous questions, which you can do. You can send anonymous questions via Buy Me a Coffee. Continues to send questions about Israel and about the Israel lobby, and I wonder if the person is trying to, I assume that, one of these days, I mean, I don't know. Right now, I don't know. One of these days, they're going to have a compilation video of me, and they're going to have everything I've ever said about Israel taken out of context to make it sound like I'm just preaching nothing but Jew hatred on here. But it's not like they haven't said those kind of things about me before. But, I just, I feel like a lot of the questions that are coming in from this person, I want to believe that you have good intentions, but you seem to keep bringing up certain things, almost like you're trying to draw me out. You want me to misspeak, right? And I've seen this kind of thing. When I was at the United Nations, when Rouhani, the reformist president of Iran, got into office, when he came to the United Nations, I followed him around. I was a Press TV reporter, and I followed him around the United Nations. And everywhere he went, they said to him, did the Holocaust happen? And every place he said, yes, the Holocaust happened, but it doesn't justify what Israel does. Everywhere. And why did they ask him that over and over again? Because they wanted him to trip up his words so they could say, aha, he stuttered, or he slightly said something, and they wanted to be able to say that Iran denied the Holocaust. And that's why they just kept asking him the same question over and over again. And this is a trick the Zionists do, right? You say, Caleb, do you hate all Jews? No, I don't hate all Jews, right? Caleb, do you hate all Jews? No, I don't hate all Jews. Caleb, do you hate all Jews? Why are you asking me this? Oh, he didn't answer the question, see? Instead of, we asked him if he hated all Jews, and he just said, why are you asking me that? Aha, we got him. That's what Zionists do. They do that. They do that. They did that to Lyndon LaRouche. When they're going after somebody, they ask them the same question 100 times, and the one time they answer it slightly differently, then they got him, and they got the proof, and then they just put the clip everywhere. See, we asked him if he hates all Jews, and after he said, no, I don't hate all Jews 100 times, he said, why are you asking me that? So they take out the first 100 times, and they just show, we asked him if he hates all Jews, and he said, why are you asking me this? Oh my God, he got so defensive. That's the game that is being played. So I really hope, Mr. Someone, you're not playing that kind of game with me. Right? And you continue to bring up these questions where you want me to go into great detail about certain things. I will try to give you answers here, but I'm going to have to start keeping my answers short because I don't want this kind of thing to be done to me. And it's been done to me before, right? People take things out of context, etc. So I'm going to give you short answers to your questions here. You send very long questions. You buy one coffee and you send me 3 questions, but it's actually 6 questions. But we're just going to go right through them here. What were your thoughts on the first Social Network movie? Never saw it. They're making a sequel. Never saw it. I never saw that movie, right? I've never seen it. It's a movie about the creation of Facebook. Never seen it. Next question. What is the relationship of big tech to the ruling class? Well, I've written extensively about how during the 1970s, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book called America Enters the Technotronic Era, where he said the way to defeat the Soviet Union was to put the United States at the center of information technology, that the USA could Americanize the world and spread the American system all over the world by dominating the information revolution, and that based on that, it's very clear the American deep state started enabling and pushing the U.S. government to invest in computers, and the Soviet Union had great breakthroughs in computer technology. They just didn't have the money to mass produce it. They had to spend on the arms race and defense, etc. In my book, Where is America Going? The first chapter is all about the computer revolution and where it came from. You can read all about that, how basically the intelligence apparatus created Silicon Valley. It's all in this book. Next question. All right, because you asked a lot in one question here. I do want to ask how Israel gained so much power over the U.S. I mean, I think it's a matter of the fact that Israel is very, very close to, there's a lot of people within our power structure who are very, very sympathetic to the Zionist project, right? That the majority of Jewish people until the Holocaust were socialists or communists. But after the Holocaust, it was British Jews who didn't die. And in Britain, you had the Rothschilds banking family that were the main funders of Theodore Herzl and the World Zionist Organization. And that among the wealthy, there are a number of people that, first of all, what the fuck? Caleb is spreading conspiracy theories. Google was created in Silicon Valley as a great melting pot. It's well documented. Google, the NSA, and Silicon Valley. Read about how Microsoft was formed. These are not conspiracy theories. I mean, the relationship of the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. military and intelligence apparatus to the computer revolution in America is very well documented. In my book, I quote mainstream scholars on this. Al Gore even came out and said, we invented the internet. And if you Google that, you'll find all kinds of people saying Al Gore wasn't lying when he said we invented the internet. This is the kind of person I can't stand, right? This is true. Why does Google have an Indian CEO? Seriously, why does Google have an Indian CEO? Oh, okay. Well, I guess if the CIA, if intelligence is involved in something, they only have white people in it. Give me a break. Give me, these kind of people, right? If something doesn't sound like something I heard on CNN, it must not be true. I could send this guy hundreds of articles documenting the role of American intelligence, etc. And this guy would go, no, it's a conspiracy theory. No. People like this are really, really special, right? People like that are really, really special. And I just, I mean, Google it for yourself. Google it for yourself. or read my published work, listen to what Google Al Gore invented the internet, and find all the articles about how Al Gore, when he bragged about how he invented the internet and how the American government was involved in that, about how he was telling the truth. I mean, come on. Ugh. But anyway, back to this guy's long questions. Was it after Watergate or Oslo? I think it was long before that, right? Israel, the USA backed Israel as part of its, its effort to dominate the Middle East region, and Israel built up its network of support. And I am at the point that I no longer say what, and then his next question says, what about Kwame Ture saying that imperialism, that Israel is an outpost of imperialism, and that Zionism was Jews trying to be rent-a-cops for Britain. That's how it started. That's how it started, right? And that's what Theodore Herzl openly marketed the Zionist project as. We will be your agents in the Middle East. It's pretty clear that at this point it's not that, okay? At this point, Israel has agency of its own. Israel has its own network of influence. It's all a conspiracy theory, Carter. No, you're spreading Russian propaganda. It doesn't sound like something that I would hear on mainstream TV, so it must be made up. You can Google it, all kinds of facts are there, but it doesn't sound like what I'm allowed to think, right? It might make me think thoughts that are critical of the mainstream media, and I can't do that. I get so sick of these people, right? During the Bush years, Republicans were like this. These people are all Democrats now, but they're the kind of person that basically they police their thoughts constantly. And if they're presented with a fact, their first question is this fact going to get me in trouble? Will this fact get me in trouble? Will it lead me to think badly of foreign policy? They are conformists, right? They are afraid that their own mind will go someplace. I cannot stand thought conformity. I really, really can't. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Carter. I mean, it's the role of American intelligence, American military in creating the internet is very, very well documented. And, that's a conspiracy theory because it sounds like something that it doesn't sound, it doesn't sound like what I heard. And like his argument that the CEO of Google is of Indian descent, because there's no one of Indian descent in the American government. Right? I mean, it's not like the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, is not of Indian descent, right? I mean, it's not like Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, there's all kinds of people in the American government apparatus of Indian descent, and that's his argument about why the American government has nothing to do with Google. It has nothing to do with Silicon Valley. I mean, okay, right? I mean, he got me. Google has a CEO of Indian descent, so therefore the American deep state had nothing to do with. I mean, it's just, he might as well have just put, I want to believe. Satanic Panic of the 1980s, what was going on? All right, so the Satanic Panic goes back way deeper than the 1980s, and I've done videos on it. But basically what the Satanic Panic was about was that, there's an element of truth. Again, the word Tavistock, it's one of these things that, it's that the Tavistock Institute exists. The Tavistock Institute for Social Research, it exists, and it's clear that it started out during the Second World War. There was an institute in Britain that did all kinds of marketing research and propaganda research during the Second World War. They were trying to make propaganda to fight the Nazis, etc. After the Second World War, the Tavistock Institute for Social Research was working with advertising companies and others. Rock and roll became very popular in America. Elvis in the 1950s, right? They took African-American music and they had white people doing it. And the 1950s, Elvis became popular, and, you had rockabilly, and rock and roll was starting to become a thing. So in Britain, it looks like the Tavistock Institute for Social Research was commissioned to try and make rock and roll more potent, to try and make rock and roll more, more exciting. Rock and roll, it gives people a thrill, right? It's got that steady beat, and going to a rock concert where the music is there and it's very loud, it's an emotional experience, right? So, it appears that because rock and roll was very popular and kids were doing the twist and all of that, that in Britain, their marketing research and their intelligence linked, these these psychological research institutes that had done research on propaganda also did research on how to make rock and roll more effective. And out of that, we got the British invasion. That because of the Tavistock Institute for Social Research, in the early 60s, Britain started churning out some of the best rock and roll bands because they had done all kinds of psychological research to figure out how to make the experience of a rock and roll concert and rock music more effective. None of that is a conspiracy theory. Now, there's some people who talk about Tavistock and they say things like Theodore Adorno actually wrote all the Beatles music. There's no proof of that. They say a lot of things that are not true, but the Tavistock Institute existed. It's pretty clear the Tavistock Institute was involved in marketing rock and roll, and the so-called British invasion, Beatlemania, right, they took rock music and they amped it up, okay? So as a result of that, when the Beatles came to the United States, they toured the South. Right, because rock and roll was more popular in the South, right, because of the African American community, which is pretty wild. So the Beatles toured the South, and when the Beatles toured the South, it caused a lot of problems, because going to a Beatles concert had a very big emotional effect on people. We've developed a tolerance in our time, right? We see ads everywhere. We're hit with emotional music and all that. But, back in the day when television was very new and mostly in black and white, and back in the day when, people only had 3 channels and, loud music and emotions, people reacted to these kind of things very strongly. They say the first time that a guy showed a movie of a train, right? The first projector screen, a guy made a movie of a train and he put it on the projector screen and there was a train and the people in the movie theater ran out of the movie theater because they thought the train was going to hit them. We look at that now and we think, what the heck is that, right? People go to the movies all the time and they watch airplanes and trains and cars, but it looked so real to people. People had never seen a movie before. So over the years, we've gotten numbed to media. Right? And that's one of the weird things about our time. We're desensitized. We look at screens all day long. We see all kinds of crazy things. We become desensitized to it. But when the Beatles came out, right, people had seen rock and roll before. The Beatles were rock and roll amped up by psychological research. And so, you look at those videos of Beatlemania, right? The girls screaming and moving back and forth and crying and, it looks like mass hysteria. It looks like mental illness. And a lot, and also rock music itself, right, is rooted in African American spiritual music, right? That African American folks brought from Africa some of the African tribal music and traditions, right? And that was mixed in with American Christian gospel music. So you got African American spirituals, Pentecostalism, which is a form of evangelical Christianity, had a special type of music that has a special steady drum beat to it and is a little bit more rock and roll-ish. And out of that you get the rock and roll sound, right? The rock and roll sound that we now call rock and roll that, really became popular in the 1950s. It's got a lot of different musical roots. And one of those roots is Pentecostalism and is, it was a form of evangelical Christianity that was very, very popular in the U.S. South. And it had roots in African traditions of African, religious ceremonies with the steady drum beats, etc. It had elements of African American spirituals in it. And that, these Pentecostal churches, they would go and they would just dance for 6 hours or 4 hours, and they would just, and these songs that go on for a really, really long time, repeating the same line over and over again. And the people are kind of dancing around and they get kind of into a trance as they're kind of dancing around and things like that. So, Beatles come along and they're kind of doing the same thing. Going to a Beatles concert, the really loud music, and you see the crowds of all the girls screaming and, and it's loud music and they're kind of in a trance. And, it looks to people like some kind of spiritual mind control, brainwashing, hypnosis or whatever. And if you're a Pentecostal, right, and something that something that is very similar to what you're doing at your church that you believe is religious is being done. And then it comes out that John Lennon gave this long interview where he said he doesn't believe in God and that religion will fade away and that we're more popular than Jesus. And, John Lennon gave an interview where he didn't just say he was more popular than Jesus. He actually said a lot of stuff. He kind of was, he was a leftist. He came from kind of a leftist family, right? I mean, in Britain, there was a lot of Marxists and leftists, and Britain was much more secular. And he gave kind of a secularist, kind of Marxian critique of religion in an interview. And that came out, and all over the South in particular, people lost their minds, and they started burning Beatles albums and shooting at the Beatles. The Ku Klux Klan threatened to bomb their concerts and all of that. And the Beatles never toured the United States again. And it was largely a response to it's largely a response to the fact that the Pentecostal religious community was, seeing that elements of their religious tradition were being incorporated into this mass marketing Beatles thing, and that the Beatles were, at least John Lennon was an atheist, was saying atheistic things. So that was kind of the beginning of the Satanic Panic. Then as the 1970s got going, right, you had the Jesus freaks, which were a really big, that's a really big kind of weird, it's like when social movements happen in America, you get these like halfway social movements, right? And so it's like, the hippie thing started. But among the hippies, there was a small, like, there were many different types of hippies that were into activism, hippies that were into drugs, hippies that were really into vampires, and hippies that were, there was all kinds. The hippie movement, the counterculture had a wide spectrum of people. There was a wing of the hippie counterculture that was into Christianity. And it was a very small wing, and most of them were Roman Catholics, and they were hippies who they saw Jesus as this long-haired guy who had no possessions and said, love your neighbor. And they were into being Christians. They interpreted Christianity in this kind of hippie way. Okay. And that was a big thing. And the Jesus freaks were a very kind of small fracture of the hippie movement that Richard Nixon started realizing. Richard Nixon and Billy Graham started making overtures towards. Billy Graham started featuring Jesus freaks on his broadcast. Billy Graham would have these long TV broadcasts where he would broadcast his religious messages. He would have Jesus freak bands and Jesus freak, young hippies with long hair that were Christians come into his audience. There were a couple groups. There was something called, there was a guy named Tony Alamo who was a Beatles marketer, who had some kind of spiritual revelation, and he quit being a Beatles marketer and he started his own church in Los Angeles. Tony Alamo, and eventually the Unification Church became a really big thing in the United States in the mid 70s. And there were like parts of the counterculture movement that were religious, and the conservatives in the United States started appealing to them. However, from the moment rock and roll music began, there was religious opposition to it, viewing it as too sexual. The drum beat was too sexual. There's an old pamphlet I saw years ago where it had a picture of some African tribes like drumming, and it said, African tribes play rock and roll music as they worship Satan. And it's just like ridiculous. And that some fundamentalists, fundamental Baptists, do believe that all rock and roll music, whether it's got Christian lyrics or no matter what, is satanic, and they believe that basically certain rhythms are not Christian. And a lot of fundamentalists don't dance, right? I watched, there was a movie a few years back that starred who was the guy from Home Improvement? I can't remember his name. Tim Allen. And it was about he becomes Amish, right? He's Tim Allen or whatever, and he's like hiding from the FBI, so he becomes Amish. And the Amish start having a dance. The Amish don't dance. They do not believe in dancing. I know that very well. I grew up in an area where there were a lot of Amish people, a lot of Mennonites. The Amish don't dance. They do not believe in dancing. And fundamental Baptists don't believe in dancing. And a lot of those religions, a lot of those very, very religious folks, I mean, the women have to wear pants, and dancing of any kind is forbidden. So obviously rock and roll music that was dance oriented, that had a steady drum beat, was just out. So the whole Satanic Panic thing, in the mid 70s, that became a thing because there used to be vinyl records, and there was the whole playing records backwards and finding messages. And not all of that was religious. For example, the Beatles. There was apparently a lot of people would play Beatles albums backwards because they believed they had hidden messages in them that weren't satanic. They just thought it was like that. A lot of people believed that Paul McCartney was actually dead, and the other Beatles knew about it and were trying to get the word out that Paul McCartney was secretly dead. That was a really big conspiracy theory in the late 1960s. And so, the Beatles' White Album, there's yes, you took the words out of my mouth, right? There's the track, the Revolution Number 9 track that's just a bunch of weird sound effects and something. I mean, they were all on drugs. They probably just threw it together so they could be on drugs or whatever. But it has a voice saying number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9. Apparently, if you play it backwards, right? If you take the record album and play it backward, it says, "Turn me on, dead man, turn me on, dead man," which sounds like necrophilia to me. I don't know, but turn me on also meant drugs. Right, that was, you'd take drugs to turn yourself on or something like that. So I don't know, but I mean, that sounds like "turn me on, dead man." That sounds like necrophilia. I mean, that sounds disgusting to me. But anyway, if you play the number 9, people were playing albums backwards because they thought that, and also it was just a common thing for mentally ill people to do. People that were becoming schizophrenic, they would play their album backwards and think that they heard the voice of, an angel telling them to, I don't know. It was playing record albums backwards was a thing that occult mysticism, people thought they could hear the voice of their dead relatives, and, people had conspiracy theories about the Beatles, and playing records backwards was apparently something people did. It was it was really 78, 79. You have the Moral Majority that was founded by Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell was from a religious tradition that opposed any political activism. And Jerry Falwell quit that religious tradition and announced he was starting a political movement to restore Christian values. It was against pornography, it was against rock and roll. 78, 79, you started to have a very big religious revival movement in the United States. And actually, Jimmy Carter was a big part of it. Jimmy Carter was the first fundamentalist Christian president. He was a fundamentalist Baptist. It's interesting because he was quite a liberal president, but he was also, he was a creationist. He was, quite a conservative, and, and he made a big point of being a fundamentalist. He was from the South, and he was liberal, but he was also, a very, very conservative person. And actually, one of the big scandals during his election was that his church, the fundamentalist church he attended in Georgia, was whites only. And that's a whole nother story I could talk about on these streams. I didn't know that whole story about Jimmy Carter's church and all that. It's actually really fascinating. I did a deep dive into that whole incident, and there's a lot more to that story. That that Jimmy Carter, even though he was a Democrat and even though he was trying to run on the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, etc., it was revealed during the 1976 presidential election that his church did not allow black people. And that was a big scandal. And it led to, there was political violence and all kinds of stuff. It's actually a wild story. But anyway, the evangelical Christianity started to become very popular in the United States in 1978, 1979 as part of the Reagan Revolution, part of the pushback against the hippie counterculture and free love and things like that. And part of it was, it was fringe. It wasn't mainstream. But among evangelical Christians, there was this belief that if you play record albums backwards, they have satanic messages in them. And that was a very big thing. That was popular. It was still going on when I was a kid. When I was a kid in the 90s. And whatever people got interested in, no matter what it was, somehow we found out it was satanic. Barney, or it was gay, or it was sexually perverted. Barney was a pedophile. I don't know why he's a pedophile. He's a giant purple dinosaur who plays with kids, so obviously he's a pedophile, right? Barney was a pedophile. Tinky Winky from the Teletubbies, he had a triangle on his head, so clearly he's gay. The Power Rangers got their power from some source other than God, so clearly they were witchcraft, satanic, or something. My gosh, everything that kids, Pokemon, right? It was, Pokemon. One of my neighbors, he said, "Did you know that Pokemon stands for Pocket Monster?" And I said, "And?" So, pocket monster. And I was like, so? But, people thought that the Pokemon were demons, right? It was like, there were these monsters that come out of your pocket and that, come out of little balls and they're like demons. Harry Potter, oh, of course, Harry Potter was satanic. We couldn't have it at my school library. And part of it was just they kind of created an industry out of scaring people. I don't know. It just was part of being an evangelical. I mean, I was not from an evangelical family. My family was a bit liberal. We went to church, right? My mother is more religious, I would say, than my father is, but we just grew up in the area, right? I mean, that was just how the area I grew up in was. And even though my family was a bit more liberal, they tended to vote for Democrats and things like that. I mean, they were heavily influenced by it. I mean, it was just that's how the culture was in small towns in the Midwest in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. And that was part of the culture, was that whatever kids were interested in, whatever the latest, Tickle Me Elmo or whatever it was, whatever kids liked, the pastors somehow discovered it was secretly satanic. And it was part of what happens. And this happens in Muslim countries too, right? And I mean, this is actually, it's interesting, in the 1980s, the United States started backing Wahhabis. And Wahhabis do this, right? In the Muslim world, whatever is popular on TV, some imam, discovers that it's actually satanic. And that's part of the shtick that Islamic fundamentalists do, right? Wahhabis do the same thing. And it's just, I don't know, it's part of what it means to be very religious in the world of television and the internet, I guess. Maybe, and it's not a thing anymore. I think now there's social media and all that. There's so much stuff out there that is like openly satanic. No one has to pretend, right? Nowadays, there's so many things out there that are blatantly anti-religious, blatantly anti-Christian, that people don't have to find hidden anti-Christian messages in the Teletubbies anymore. I mean, it's just, now there's Richard Dawkins. Now there's, people like, I heard in Portland, Oregon, right? There was some church. It was just a regular church that was doing church in the park, and some stupid woke anarchists were like, "Oh my God, you're homophobic," and we're like, Antifa was like beating them up, and like they weren't even. It wasn't political. They were just some church was doing what churches do and having church in the park, and Antifa was just so mad. Oh, I want to go bully somebody, basically. That they went after them. Oh, they don't look woke to me. They're Christians. I mean, so nowadays the satanic panic is pretty much over, because it doesn't, like, there's so much stuff out there that is offensive to Christians that there's no need to see it in hidden messages anymore. But in the 1990s, I mean, really starting in the late 70s, it's kind of the pushback to the 1960s counterculture. You had the rise of the evangelical Christian right. In the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, it was part of the late Cold War normal, was that there was a layer of people who believed that, mainstream media was in a conspiracy against. And part of it was Geraldo. Geraldo Rivera did all these TV stories with like over the top, crazy, stories about kidnapping and torture. And, there were all these like really violent news stories about like satanic murders and stuff, some of which was disproven. Some of it has been debunked. I think there was a book called Michelle Remembers, and that was proven to have been, I mean, that was, and there were people lying, and going around all the talk shows talking about how, they'd been kidnapped by Satanists, and a lot of that was a hoax. Some of it was probably true, but some of it was a hoax as well. So I don't know. It was just a weird thing. And that QAnon to some degree or other channeled some of this. QAnon was different, right? QAnon, it was the satanic pedophiles and all of that. And that there was elements of the satanic panic in QAnon. There was like echoes of it, but it was a different thing. I mean, it's just, look, I would say that, this world is run by Satan. But I don't think Satan is, secretly, I don't think Barney the dinosaur is Satan. So, but, I think part of it, it's actually very similar. I remember when I was in Cleveland in these years, getting politically active, there would be a lot of vegan protests. There'd be these young people that would protest Kentucky Fried Chicken. And they were young liberal kids from the suburbs. There's a lot of wealthy suburbs in Cleveland, Lakewood, Beechwood, Parma, and, they would protest Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I would argue with the young people there and say, why don't you protest U.S. imperialism? Why don't you protest the wars? They didn't know enough about politics and world events to protest the wars. And they weren't interested, right? It was like that was a bunch of boring politics and world events. But protesting Kentucky Fried Chicken, it was like something's wrong. They have a feeling that something is wrong. Something is deeply, deeply wrong in our country. They just have a gut feeling that something is deeply wrong in our country. Something's wrong. And beneath all this wealth, all this superficiality, people don't care about each other. People are alienated. There's something's rotten here. And so I'm going to find, and then they dig up the videos of, the awful, conditions and how gross the factory farms are and stuff. And that becomes the outlet for their empathy. It's like they can smell the evil in the air. And so because they can smell the evil in the air, they have to find a place. And so they find the factory farms, right? And that's just, I'm not going to defend factory farms. I eat meat and all of that. But it's like, for me, I would be frustrated. Like, why won't you just oppose U.S. imperialism and all of that? Well, that would require them to argue with somebody who thought the U.S. military was good and all of that. And it was like that was the injustice they could latch onto. And it was served. And there's a lot like this, right? I often will reference on here, I will reference the 1947 UFO hysteria across America. The word flying saucer, right? The flying saucer, 1947, World War II has been over for 3 years, and the U.S. economy starts booming. The post-World War II economic expansion is starting to go, there's a strike wave, right? And the steel workers and the auto workers, start demanding a lot and getting a lot of concessions and, starting 1947, but then, really up into the 50s and all that, the U.S. economy starts really expanding. And by about 1950, 1952, the USA at that point had the best economy in the world. And that's the American dream, the white picket fence and all of that. The black people certainly didn't have it. They didn't have it in Appalachia. Not every American had it, but the American suburbs, there was a layer of people in America, a lot of whom were industrial workers who had never graduated high school, who were living very, very, very well in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And of course, that's when they had the huge crackdown on the Communist Party, McCarthyism. And everyone had this new thing in their home called a television. And the TVs got everyone really, really scared. The Soviet Union was gonna bomb them. And so on that basis, the Communist Party was completely, wiped out by the FBI, the McCarthyite witch hunts in Hollywood and all of that. But another thing that happened in 1947 was we had the UFO hysteria. Right. And, there was the Roswell incident or whatever, which still people don't know what exactly happened there. But after that, all kinds of people started hallucinating and seeing stuff in the sky that wasn't there. All right. All over America, people just started seeing flying saucers. Right. And they saw flying saucers and it was a hysteria. And I have often referenced there was a hit song, a bluegrass gospel song from those years that was like talking about the flying saucer hysteria. The last verse of that song, it's a really good song, and I can play it on here. I'll actually play it since I've played it on here many times. It's actually a very good song. Song was written in 1947. I'll play it, but I want you to listen to the very last verse of the song. And I think you'll get it when you listen to the last verse. So we'll put the flying saucer song on here, right? I could swear I had the... Hold on. I've got it somewhere. All right. Where is it? I could swear I've got this song on here. All right. Well, I don't have it on here, so I have to find a version of it to put on, but yeah, it was a hit song in 1947. I'm not going to play the original version of it, but it was a Baptist, a country gospel bluegrass song. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. The last verse of the song, the lyrics to the last verse of the song tell you everything. Right? It tells you everything. It's in the last verse of the song. So I'm going to this is obviously not the original version. This is someone performing it. But listen to the last verse of the song, and that it just tells you, I think this is what the Satanic Panic is about. I think this is what the people protesting Kentucky Fried Chicken was about. I think this is about like what was underlying the entire late Cold War normal and all the things like that. The Satanic Panic, the UFO scare, all of it. Okay, so I'm going to put this on and listen to the last verse, right? If it ever downloads. I'm waiting for it to go around. But I think that's that last verse of the song will basically tell you all what it's about. Good question, by the way. The brothers in Minnesota, Carter and his brother, they seem to be very interested when I start talking about the 90s. I don't know what that is. Maybe they're historians or something. But you seem to be very, very interested in me talking about, it's funny. I feel like an old man. I'm talking about old times. I'm only 38, but there you go. All right. So, yeah, this is the hit song. Listen to the last verse of the song. The lyrics to the very, very last verse of the song. And that basically just tells you everything, right? And I'll reflect on that a little more, and then I'll answer any more questions people have, and then I'll be done. So here we go.
I have a slide. You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It might be the coming of Judgment Day. It's a sign, there's no doubt of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friend, you better start to pray. When you see your saucer fly like you're coming through the sky, you should realize price you have to pay. You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. Might be the coming of Judgment Day. Now many people think the saucers might be someone's foolish dream. Maybe they were sent down here from Mars. If you just stop and think, you realize that's what it means. They're more than atom bombs or falling stars. And though the war may be through, there's regrets and trouble brewing. And those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. They're a terrifying sight as they fly on day and night. It's a warning that we better mend our ways. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. Might be the coming of the Judgment Day. Get your Now many people think the saucers might be someone's foolish dream. Maybe they were sent down here from Mars. And you just stop and think, you realize that's what it means. They're more than atom bombs or falling stars. And though the war may be through, there's this sense of trouble brewing. And those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. They're a terrifying sight as they fly all day and night. It's a warning that we better mend our ways. You better pray to the Lord when you see the flying saucers. Might be the coming of the Judgment Day.
Yes. So, all right. So the last verse of the song is, though the war may be through, there's unrest and trouble brewing. The flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today, you're running out of time. Okay, so basically what that is that America had been through the Great Depression, right? We'd been through the Second World War, which is one of the most catastrophic events in human history that ended with atomic bombs. And then coming out of the Great Depression, where people were literally starving on the streets, and then coming out of the Second World War, in which tens of millions of people died, and then atomic bombs went off, and coming out of that, suddenly we had the highest standard of living in the world. And it's basically, it's a trauma response. You can't just go through something like that and then be fine. And then, oh, we had the booming economy, you know, everyone can have lots of money and we have a booming economy. And then you're just fine. No, you can't just be fine if you go through something like that. And that even though we had the highest standard of living in the 1950s and even up into the 60s and 70s in America, something was very, very wrong. Something was very, 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 very wrong. And everybody kind of knew it. And the 1947 UFO hysteria, it was, you have a country of people who have been through, you know, all of this. They're not just going to be fine. You know what I mean? They're not just going to go, oh, okay, all right, well, I guess, all right, we had a huge war. We had a bunch of people starving to death. All right, well, back to normal. No, you can't do that, right? People are still going to be looking over their shoulder. That's part of trauma, right? You know, it's part of, you know, and so beneath the surface in post-World War II America, there was this feeling that something rotten was there. And part of that was the reality of what we were doing to other countries around the world, in Vietnam and Korea, etc. Part of that was the reality of Jim Crow segregation in the South. And I've said many times that, you know, like, I've told the story of my grandfather. You know, I remember being at his house, my grandfather from Missouri, and the screen door popped out, right? He was trying to shut the screen door, and the screen door popped out, and he said, "God damn it, this house is built on top of an Indian graveyard." When I was a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I was quite scared. I thought, oh my God, there's ghosts here or something. I didn't know that was an expression. That was an expression that, you know, if something seemed like it wasn't working, it was built on top of an Indian graveyard, right? But I've said many times, America is built on top of an Indian graveyard and an African graveyard, and the graveyard of the Vietnamese people, and the graveyard of the Korean people, and the graveyard of people from all over the planet. And that the wealth that the super rich monopolies on Wall Street have is based on super exploiting millions of people all over the world. And for a while, we got a chunk of it. At least the white Americans, we got a chunk of it. We got, you know, a house and a car and a white picket fence, and we got a comfortable lifestyle. But we knew it was acquired in an impure way. Now, the legal term is fruit of a poison tree, right? If a cop goes into your house and he finds something, but he doesn't have a search warrant, it's supposed to be not admissible because he acquired it in an impure way. Fruit of a poison tree. And in Islam, in the Shia tradition, they talk about haram, that if you sin in order to acquire something, if you steal food, when you eat it, it might make you sick because it's corrupted, right? If you, if you steal money and you use that money to buy something, it's going to break because it was acquired through your, I mean, that if you, in the process of acquiring something, you acquire something in an impure, immoral way, it is tainted. America has always been tainted. And I have long maintained that the only way we can untaint America is with some kind of spiritual awakening, with some kind of, revolution. And part of that is changing the economic foundations, but part of that is a spiritual change that has to happen as well. And that wokeness, a lot of wokeness, was that a lot of young people were convinced that they could make America no longer cursed and make America no longer impure by saying magic words. If we change the names of all the streets, right? If we make it George Floyd, if we make it George Floyd Avenue and George Floyd Street and George Floyd Boulevard, and we all put on, African, what do you call that? The things the members of Congress wore, and we kneel in the halls of Congress. And if we all say Black Lives Matter and Trans Lives Matter, and we all, we talk about Turtle Island, if we just use enough magic words, this will be cured. Wrong. Won't. That's not how things work, right? The economic foundations primarily have to be changed. But in addition to that, the way we relate to each other has to be changed. There has to be an economic foundation in the base. The economic base must change. The superstructure must also change. That's a very long answer to our question from the Carter brothers. I'm going to call you guys the Carter brothers from now on. So there we go. The Carter brothers in Minnesota got me going talking about the Satanic Panic. All right, so Penny had a video she wanted me to show about Tanzania. It's from China, Chinese television, but it's about the construction of power plants in Tanzania, which is something I am very interested in. I am very interested in development. Oh, it's not from China. I'm sorry. The video is not from China, but it's just no, it's CGTN Africa. It's from a Chinese TV network, and it's about the power plant they've just constructed in the African nation of Tanzania. Tanzania's relationship with China goes back very far. It actually goes back to the Mao era. Mao Zedong didn't do a huge amount around the world. One thing, though, that Mao did was they built railroads in Tanzania. Tanzania had a socialist president, Julius Nyerere, who was not Soviet aligned necessarily. He was friendly to both China and the Soviet Union. And so China in the 1970s, before China had its reform and opening up, they did send volunteers to build railroads in Tanzania. So China's relationship with Tanzania is very deep. So here we go.
Located on the Rufiji River, this massive project stands 137 meters high and stretches over a kilometer long. With 9 turbine units coming online, the station generates over 2,000 megawatts of power. Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan officially commissioned the facility, marking what leaders call a new era for the nation's economy.
This project provides nearly half of our country's power. It will help end the frequent blackouts that hurt our factories, businesses and hospitals. With the surplus electricity, we can boost trade, attract investments, create jobs and grow our economy.
The plant is expected to cut average power bills by 30% and turn the country to an energy importer into an exporter. Analysts estimate it could boost GDP growth by 4%. The Chinese company called China Power played a key role in building the dam and installing its heavy equipment using advanced concrete technology to speed up construction.
We adopted an integrated energy dissipation technology, combining wide steel piers, stepped spillways, and steeling basins. We also applied high-volume fly ash roller-compacted concrete construction technology using continuous layer-by-layer placement of roller-compacted concrete. The maximum height of a single continuous concrete pour was 41.2 meters, which accelerated the construction process while improving construction quality.
With clean, reliable energy now flowing to the national grid, Tanzania is taking a giant leap toward industrialization and energy independence. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN.
Excellent. Infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. I like how Penny follows the positive news coming out of the anti-imperialist countries. And that's, Penny's books are just full of statistics and information about what they're doing to build up the Union of Sahel States. She follows the Union of Sahel States. She follows China. And I really appreciate that work that Penny does, just kind of following the pro-growth, anti-colonial movements of the world. Russia building power plants across Africa. Yes, send me something about that to show. But anyhow, folks, I appreciate you all being here. I'm glad I did this stream. I think it's always better to stream than not stream. Tonight, I didn't feel like I had a huge amount to say, but look, we got on here. We had some good conversations. I'll be back. One thing I will just throw out there, just throwing this out there. I still owe a huge amount of money to people for the convention, right? We did it all right? And it was a tight squeeze and we got through it. But I still owe a lot of money to a lot of people. So any donation people could send to the Center for Political Innovation, cpiusa.org/donate, would be greatly appreciated, right? If you haven't had a chance to watch my keynote speech, go and watch it. We're going to put a transcript of it on the website soon. You know, and we'll publish it. It's going to be published. I do have a book coming out very soon also. I made a book version of, I gave a slideshow on this channel called, you know, how could an actual revolution happen in America? I turned it into a small booklet. And so I'm just kind of going over it and making some changes. But, you know, it's going to be a small book that'll be available soon. As soon as that's available, get yourself a copy. I'm going to try to make it very inexpensive also. You know, I feel like this is a book that would be of interest to many people, but I don't want to make it too expensive. I want to make it kind of inexpensive. It's not going to be very long. It's just basically the presentation beefed up with quotations and stuff. So I'm going to put that out there. But yeah, if you can send us a donation, that'd be great. Be sure to get a copy of this book when it's out. I'm just, you know, figuring it all out, you know. But yeah, CPI. Dare to struggle, dare to win. We are building a movement. We had our convention. It was a great success. Lots more video of the convention coming out. And I know a lot of people need me to send them their videos to edit and different things. And I'm on it, folks. I'm doing the best I can. Yeah, I feel really good. I still got the high from our convention. It was amazing. And everyone who's watching right now who was there can attest. It was amazing to spend a week with other people committed to anti-imperialism. And we have exciting plans for the fall. So dare to struggle, dare to win. Yeah, I'm going to put on the closing music. Yeah, I really appreciate all of you. And we'll be back. We'll be back. Yeah, so, yeah, keep an eye out. If I'm not back tomorrow night, I'll definitely be on Saturday. So I'm always around. So dare to struggle, dare to win.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.